Hi everyone, welcome back to the next chapter of the Pathwork method. I truly hope this book also guides you to experience miracles after miracles as you shine your true light onto your false beliefs. Right amount of effort, as she mentions, will lead you to heaven on earth. I hope you enjoy and thank you so much for listening. Chapter 3: Accomplishing a real change of feelings. I bring blessings for all of you, my friends. By now you will have understood one thing clearly: the necessity for self-development on this earth plane which exists for that very purpose. No matter how difficult life may be at times, only those who fulfills this purpose can find peace in their souls. I promise to start this course so that each one of you can find your way by learning how to go about it, where to begin, and what is involved in doing the work. Treat my words as a meditation. You should retain these words and not only read them once, for that will not be enough. You should meditate on these teachings so this knowledge may eventually grow from being superficial and intellectual to reaching the deeper regions of your being. Only then will they be really beneficial to you. Everybody knows that it is important to be a decent person, not to commit so-called sins, to give love, to have faith, and to be kind to others. However, this is not enough. In the first place, knowing all this and actually being able to act on it are two very different stories. You may be able to, by voluntary action, to refrain from committing a crime, but you cannot possibly force yourself to feel that you do not want to harm anybody ever. You may act kindly towards another, but you cannot force yourself to feel kindly. Neither can you force yourself to have love in your heart or to have real faith in God. Whatever pertains to emotion is not dependent upon your direct actions or even your thoughts. Changing your feelings require a slow process of self-development and self-recognition. You may realize that you do not have enough faith, but realizing this and trying to force yourself to have it by telling yourself, I must have faith, will not bring you one step closer to it, quite the contrary. Superficially, you may be able to talk yourself into it, but this does not mean that your faith or your ability to love is real. And that is what the path is all about. Change of feelings. Now, how to go about changing your innermost feelings, that is the question. That is where we have to begin and where I have to show you the way. In the first place, my friends, you cannot change anything as long as you do not know what is really in you. The greatest difficulty on this path is that people tend to fool themselves about who they really are. Now, I'm not only talking about the unconscious mind, which you all know exists. Between the conscious and the subconscious mind, there is another layer which is much closer to the conscious mind. However, you are still unaware of this layer because you want to be unaware of it. You escape from it, although its symptoms and signs may be right under your nose. People flee from such awareness because they mistakenly think that what they do not know does not exist. You may not think so in exactly these words, but feelings of this sort go on in you without you quite realizing them. However, even if you turn away from your own inner reality, it does exist. It may be the temporary reality of this present time, but still it is part of the reality of your life and a stage of your development. It is your reality now. Remember the lecture I gave you about the higher self, the lower self, and the mask. What I have just explained is part of the mask self. All of you know that it is wrong to do or think or feel certain things. If these feelings still exist in your lower self, you turn away from them, thinking you have thereby eliminated what you recognize as wrong. But avoidance or denial is the greatest mistake a human being can make, for it causes indefinitely more trouble, more problems, and more inner and outer conflicts than anything you know in your conscious mind. Facing life. I have mentioned the various spiritual laws which are constantly being violated by human beings. The process I have just described violates one of these laws, the law of facing life. To face life's reality means to be able to face yourself as you are, with all your imperfections. If you do not face life first, you can never develop. No system trying to teach ways to jump over this hurdle can ever be very successful, for seeking such shortcuts also violates a spiritual law. All of you are unconsciously involved in this harmful process all the time, even though some of you may have already gained a certain amount of self-knowledge. There is not one among you who has not had at least one realization about an inner trend, making this trend really conscious. Nevertheless, in other areas, your conscious mind still flees from facing the inner truth. You may even know your shortcomings, but you certainly do not know all your real motives. You do not understand why you have certain opinions, tastes, or idiosyncrasies. Even your good qualities may be partly influenced by an unconscious fault or wrong inner current. The tendencies about which you have hitherto deceived yourself have to be understood with respect to the influences and connections they have. There is nothing in the human soul that comes entirely from the higher self or the lower self, because everything mixes constantly. Purification means to separate, understand, and rearrange in conscious understanding all these various trends, thus purifying the basic good trends from all masks of self-deception and from influences caused by character weaknesses. The higher self in you says, I want to be perfect. I know this is the will of God. But it is the ignorance of the lower self that makes you think perfection can be attained by turning away from your imperfections and disregarding them. It is also the lower self that always wants to have everything so very comfortable. The lower self wants to be in a high position too, but for different reasons than the higher self. Your higher self seeks to advance for the love of God by way of recognition and enlightenment, and is aware that only when you are perfect will you be truly capable of loving your fellow creatures. But your lower self wants to be perfect in order to have more ego gratification and to swell its head to be admired. All of you, without exception, feel this way. Here is an example where both the higher self and the lower self wants the same thing, but their motives are entirely different. It is of utmost importance for the purification of your personality and for the sake of a healthy and harmonious soul to separate these motives and to recognize their voices. Do not feel I am blaming you, nor you should blame yourself when you begin to recognize these trends in you. I am stating a fact, and one of the basic requirements for your past is that you accept the fact of many negative trends still existing in yourself. Only from this premise can you go on and change the impurity of your motives. You must also recognize the reasons why your lower self turns you away from facing yourself. One reason is that to recognize yourself as imperfect is unpleasant. The other is that the lower self is lazy and never wants to work. Yet it requires work to face what is in you, especially when it comes to facing the unpleasant things. So the first step, my friends, in your decision to walk the path of self-development and purification is to become clear about this. If you realize this, you will not be discouraged when you are busy on this first half of the work that is necessary. You can reach perfection only by going through your imperfections, not by going around them. A thorough self-search takes time. Going on this path does not mean a constant and smooth improvement of yourself and your life conditions. This again would be completely unrealistic. It is necessary for you to face the fact that the path is long and that times of testing will not cease as quickly as you would like. A great deal of harm is being done when people are led to understand that by following certain rules of metaphysical teachings, their problems will altogether cease, or that they appear to cease for a time that will prove a sign of success. To imagine that going on this path of purification will immediately lessen your troubles or problems is immature and childish. Certainly, your outer and inner problems will lessen and finally cease, but only after a long time, after you have first thoroughly understood your inner makeup and rearranged your inner currents. In this way, you will dissolve your inner images that are directly responsible for your conflicts. Once you have attained some victories over yourself, you will fully realize this truth, but it will take a long time and years of work. Then very gradually, the times of trial will lessen in impact and frequency as harmony grows in your soul and as you really take charge of yourself and become aware of who you are. When I say aware of yourself, I mean knowing your lower self utterly and completely, which does not mean that you have already overcome it. Meditate on the fact that you can expect to find aspects of yourself you may be shocked about. Expect this and meet it halfway instead of hiding and escaping from it. Expect that just as you have had tests before you even started on this direct path, tests will still come your way for quite a time. The only difference is that a person who is on such a path will, after some successful work, understand that each testing and each time of woe means something very particular. A particular lesson to learn about the self is conveyed by each difficult period and every hardship. Only after considerable time will your mind be trained to this direction so that you will find out faster and faster what the lesson is. The moment you will understand the significance of these periods, such particular testing will cease. As long as you have not understood it, the testing will continue. It may recede after a while, but it will come back in the same or similar form until you have learnt the lesson. Those who have experienced what it means to understand the message of a particular hardship, to really understand it to its core, will realize what a blessing it is. The price of spiritual growth is high. Another thought for meditation. When you go on this path, you must also prepare yourself to abide by another of the spiritual laws, which says that there is a price to be paid for everything. Whoever tries to avoid this will finally pay a much heavier price. Every single person is doing this constantly in one way or another. Some do it more obviously, others more subtly and secretively. Many people are not doing it outwardly, but psychologically you are all doing it, particularly when you approach this path with only half open eyes. Realize that there is a price, but the price is well worth it. When you are about to buy a house and you want a beautiful mansion, you are reconciled to paying an adequate price. You will not accept a palace for the price of a shack. On the material level, you have no quarrel with this truth. But on the emotional, psychological, and spiritual level, you constantly wish for a palace for the price of a heart, and sometimes not even for any price at all. The price you pay by going on this path of development is certainly a high one, but there is absolutely no other means on earth or in heaven to gain harmony, love, happiness, and complete inner security. The price is no self-pity, no self-delusion, utter severance with the little ego, time, effort, patience, perseverance, and courage. What you will receive for this price is indeed 100 times worth it, but do not expect to see the reward right after you start. By start, I mean a period of at least 2 years of work in this manner, provided you do not work half-heartedly. In other words, and speaking symbolically, your money must be first paid in full. I know that my words are not what a self-indulgent person likes to hear. There is no easy method and no magic formula by which you can obtain the happiness you always seek. I cannot promise you the precious gifts of heaven on earth if you merely do certain prayer exercises. If I were to tell you such things, you would be well justified in being suspicious and doubtful, even though you might undoubtedly prefer to hear this. What I am offering you is real and true. Each one of you has the chance to find out for yourself by trying and following my advice. My advice to begin with is this: meditate upon the words I have given you here. Consider what the price must be and what you must expect. Then make your decision. Are you willing to take this path? Oh, you may say, I'm too tired. I can only answer that this is very short-sighted. If you are tired or weak, it is because your inner forces exhaust themselves, laboring in the wrong channels, so that your strength cannot organically renew itself as it does in a soul that functions well. If you would only start and not be dismayed by the first struggles, you would finally succeed in setting this inner currents right. By doing so, you would set free in yourself a wonderful life force and a spark that will change your life completely. I cannot promise you that all your problems will cease, for they are a necessary part of your past to begin with, a challenge you can learn from if you meet them maturely. However, I can promise you that after you have fulfilled certain fundamental conditions, you will not be depressed anymore by your life and your difficulties. I can promise you that the tiredness will cease and that you will have the strength to go through your difficulties and to bear your cross in the right way, knowing why and what it's all about. The most difficult thing for you and the most weakening aspect of your life is that you cannot see the reason for anything that happens to you. Only on a path into yourself will you find out the reason, and this alone will give you the strength you need. Furthermore, I can promise you that after a certain time on the path, you will enjoy life in spite of your difficulties, even before they have actually begun to cease. You will come to relish your life in a way you have never been able to before. I can promise that you will be vibrantly alive, first at intervals and later more consistently. To the extent you understand yourself and begin to put order into your soul, this vibrant life force will fill you. Life will be beautiful to you in all its reality. So I say to you truly, do not postpone this work. No matter how late you think it is never too late. Whatever you accomplish on this earth will have an eternal value. And when I speak of accomplishment, I do mean the conquering of your lower self. 3 types of work. Here is another thought, my friends, for this initial decision, which you must approach with open eyes. Distinguish the 3 necessary types of work involved in purifying yourself. One is your outer behavior, the recognition of your apparent faults and qualities, as well as every occurrence that is on the surface. The next phase, and these phases often overlap, is tackling that layer of yourself that does not belong directly to your subconscious, but which you are unaware of because you are deliberately escaping it. This layer has to be treated in a different manner, which I will show you. The third and equally important layer is your subconscious mind. Do not believe that what is in the subconscious is so far away that it has no effect on you. You are constantly dominated by your subconscious without knowing it. It is very possible to find out slowly but surely what is in your subconscious, at least to some extent. Distinguish the trends in you which stand in direct relationship to your conscious will and are thus directly controlled through an act of will. You will also discover trends in you which are connected with your emotions and cannot be directly forced to respond to your wishes. The world of emotion can only change by organic growth, not by pressure and voluntary action, except in an indirect way. Let us assume you find out that deep down you're lacking faith or love. You cannot force yourself to have faith or love, no matter how hard you try directly. But what you can make yourself do is to walk this path, to follow these steps, to overcome perhaps a lack of discipline that makes it so hard for you to work diligently on your path. By doing so, you will not work directly on your lack of love or faith, for instance, but will simply get to know yourself and find out why you lack these attributes. When you gradually understand this without forcing yourself directly to have love or faith, eventually the life force will fill you and will automatically generate these feelings without any direct endeavor on your part. If your emotions begin to change after a few years, you can consider it a wonderful success. The change will happen so naturally that you will not even be fully aware of it at first. Study these words now. Think about them deeply. Believe me, my friends, all this is neither as difficult as it may seem to you now, nor is the past a miracle that will procure happiness for you without demanding from you all you have in honesty, willpower, and effort. I want to say something else to you about this phase of preparation and decision. Expect to have a fight with yourself. It will be the fight between the lower self and the higher self, and your conscious ego self will determine which side will win. It must be a long fight, which at first will manifest in preventing you from following this path at all. The lower self may send messages such as, I do not believe in it, or it may not be necessary after all, or I'm too tired, or I have no time. It is necessary for you to recognize these messages for what they are and understand where they come from. Use them as a starting point to delve deeper into your soul. Try to see clearly what is really speaking within you when you receive these hidden excuses and pretenses. If you anticipate the struggle, you will be able to look and listen and have a first victory. Also, you have learned already to some degree the process of uncovering your mask and wrong motives, which will stand you in good stead later on when the lower self will try to obstruct your path by other means. It will simply try to hold on to individual soul currents. By then you already know how to deal with it a little better. Do not just put the superficial excuses aside. Test them, deal with them, examine them. Many of you are frightened of what may come out of your lower self. It is important to learn to interpret and translate such vague feelings into concise thoughts. This fear is an important reason why a person shies away from meeting the self. It is childish to imagine that whatever you do not cherish in you does not exist if you avoid facing it. The lower self is immature and ignorant. Its very nature is faults and distortions. So I say to you, do not shy away from what is in you. All of you know that the lower self is merely a temporary layer and does not constitute your entire personality. It is here now to be dealt with, but it is not the real you. Your higher self, which is partly free, already manifests through your good qualities, your generosity, your kindness, or whatever else there is in you that belongs to the higher self. But even where it cannot manifest as yet because it is deeply hidden behind the lower self, your higher self still exists in its shining perfection. How can you reach it unless you penetrate the lower self? So do not be afraid. Do not be shocked when you first encounter your lower self, where heretofore you had no idea of it. It is a necessary temporary formation, but it never represents the ultimate you. As a matter of fact, reaching the stage where you're shocked about some of the facets that you had not suspected before constitutes a sign of improvement. It strongly implies good progress, but without going through this stage, painful as it may be for a while, you can have no further victory and success. This is part of the past, my friends. If you meditate upon these words and at the same time try to be aware of your fear of your lower self and your shame of it, and if you learn to live with this truth and knowledge, you will conquer. Then you will meet your fear realistically and you will not be hiding from it as you are hiding from a few other things in you. And now I will retire, my friends. God's blessing to all of my dear friends. Peace be with you, being God.